In the previous lesson, we tried a number of edits where we set an in point and an out point in the viewer and placed the clip in the timeline based on the playhead position. This is called 3-point editing, as only 3 points had to be defined to complete the edit. We used 2 points in the source to set the duration and had 1 point in the destination to match one of the source points. In this case, Final Cut matched the timeline playhead to the viewer clip's in point. It does this by default when no sequence in or out has been set. In the timeline ruler, click over the middle of the low-angle clip and hit I to mark an in. Then park the timeline over the first clip of the sequence. If we do an overwrite edit, what do you think Final Cut Pro will use to set the position? Use the Overwrite Edit shortcut F10 to find out. In the presence of a sequence in point, Final Cut ignores the playhead position and matches the in of the source with the in of the destination. Hit Command Z to undo, and hit Option I to clear the in point. This time, put the timeline playhead in the same place, and hit O to mark an out. Park the playhead elsewhere so the effect is clear. Now hit F10. Final Cut matched the out points of the source and destination and back-timed accordingly. All 3-point editing. Hit Command Z to undo. Let's mix it up further. Use the down arrow key and go to the sequence out point. Shift left arrow 4 times to go back 4 seconds and hit I to mark a sequence in. In the 360 view clip in the viewer, hit Option X to clear the in and out. Now scrub to 3 seconds and hit I to mark an in. And don't mark an out. Now hit F10. Final Cut matched the ins and used the sequence in and out to set the duration of the edit. The same could be done setting an out with no in the viewer, as long as Final Cut has 3 points to work with. Hit Command Z to undo. You can use the ins and outs of clips already in the timeline to set sequence ins and outs. Just park the playhead over the middle of any clip in the timeline and hit X. See the in and out markers? Try it over another clip in the timeline. Now, you'd only need to set 1 point in a viewer clip to perform an edit. In some cases, Final Cut doesn't even need you to set in and out markers to do weird and wonderful things. First, clear the sequence in and out by hitting Option X. Click in the viewer and do the same. And scrub to the rear view of the car, looking up the street, at about 6 seconds. We're not going to change this playhead position because we need a landmark to understand what Final Cut is doing, but once you understand the effect, this point can be moved anywhere you like. In the timeline, click in the middle of the low-angle clip and zoom in a bit with Command+. Then, use the up arrow key to go to the first frame of the clip. Now, drag the 360 clip into the canvas and drop it on the blue Replace section of the overlay to perform a replace edit. Now back up a few seconds and hit the spacebar to play. Final Cut used the in and out of the low-angle clip to set the duration of the edit. No in or out was necessary, and it matched the playhead position of the source to the playhead position of the destination. This is already quite nice, but watch this. In the timeline, move the playhead closer to the end of the replaced clip. Now hit the shortcut to perform a replace edit, F11. So what just happened? Our rear view up the street frame now falls toward the end of our edit instead of the first frame. It still matches the playhead position in the viewer to the playhead position in the canvas, extending the in and out points as necessary to match the duration. This can be very useful cutting to music or dialogue when you want to emphasize a point with a well-timed action, but don't want to flog it to death with a hard cut. And this will only work if there's enough media available on either side of the playhead in the viewer clip. It's a great tool to have at your fingertips, and you can also use a replace edit with ins and outs defined in the timeline. A superimpose edit can also be fit into sequence ins and outs, but like the replace edit, if no sequence in or out is set, The superimpose edit will use the clip boundaries on either side of the current playhead position in the timeline. For example, click in the middle of the short clip we just replaced. Now go to the 360 view clip in the viewer. Park the playhead over a much later portion of the clip, around 15 seconds. And note that we haven't set an in or an out. Now, drag the clip into the canvas overlay and drop it on superimpose, or use the shortcut F12. Instead of replacing the clip, it covers it perfectly on the next track above. You might do this to test a replacement edit before fully committing to it, or to apply a blend mode or composite effect. The last option in the edit overlay, Fit to Fill, involves speed changes, so we're going to cover it in a later lesson. In the next lesson, you'll apply what you've learned to do your own edit of these clips.